Hi all, this is Professor Luce. I'm going to talk about nervousness to an extent and also how to handle it during your speeches. So there's a couple of things to consider. I know with chapters 11 through 13 we talked about the outlines of what can go on your note cards. It's keywords, but also you can put things that'll be helpful to you. So for an example, I only write on one side of the note cards, and on the other side you can write numbers if you have multiple note cards. That way it'll allow you, in case you happen to drop them for whatever reason, you can always know what order they're going to be in. Because during a speech, you're definitely going to forget what the order would be. You could add pictures if you wanted to, or something that makes you feel more relaxed. The note cards are really just there for you to help you. They are not meant to be read. In some of the examples of speeches that you've been able to watch, you'll notice that they're reading slightly off camera. And there's not just a difference in the eye contact, but in the way that they sound. So if they say something like, "This is what goes on your note cards that you hold during your speech," you can tell the difference between somebody speaking and somebody actually reading word for word what they wrote down. You are not allowed to read. You must be giving a speech. You can look at your note cards that are key words, but there's a vast difference between looking down occasionally at your note cards and reciting the speech, using those note cards to jog your memory, versus reading a speech that you wrote at the last minute and just reading it word for word just off screen. Your audience knows something's off. They may not know that you're reading, but they know something's wrong and they're not as engaged. Some other things to remember with nervousness is that I would like you to stand up while speaking, if at all possible. Here's why. It is completely possible to have gestures, to have inflection, to have some sort of movement while you're in front of a computer, sitting down. However, at the stages that you all are at, for the most part, you're not going to be likely to do that. Instead, you're going to sit with your arms tucked in like this, and you're going to look at the camera, or you're going to look down or off camera, and you're going to be making those types of nonverbal behaviors that are not conducive for a speech. If you're standing up, you're much more likely to have those gestures, to have effective movement, to have good eye contact with the camera, instead of all the things that you don't want to happen in a speech. So I am asking that you try to stand up, have effective movement. That does not mean that you do things like you rock, you sway, you might go left to right. Sometimes you stand and you become a tree and you're in a breeze and you just kind of slowly move back and forth. And it's just like it takes over your body. So during the peer evaluations, this is a good time to try out your setup, figure out what works for your camera, figure out what sort of things you do while you're talking and what kinds of things maybe that you're not doing that you should be doing. That's the whole point of the peer evaluation, is it's a dress rehearsal. It doesn't mean you have a rough draft of your speech, you just kind of get up and say some things. You actually have to have a good final version of your speech ready to go. Because if you don't have the content, then nothing else really matters. You can't work on the delivery because you're not going to know what you should be saying. So you want to make sure that you have a good final version ready to go before submitting your peer evaluation video. Some other things to consider with nervousness. In terms of this class, this speech is really not going to impact your overall grade a ton. It's not going to kill you. It doesn't mean that you can't get an A in the class. On the other side, if you do really well in the speech, it doesn't guarantee you an A for the rest of the semester. This is a chance to kind of see where you are and what areas you need to improve upon. Hopefully you get the content down, because if you get the structure down for this speech, for the other speeches, it's not going to change a whole lot. Obviously, you're not going to be talking about yourself anymore after this speech, but if you get the idea of what goes into an introduction, do you have an attention getter? Do you have a preview? Do you have 4 clearly identified main ideas? Do you have a review statement? Do you have a preview? You need those things, as we talked about with the introduction and conclusion section, in order to have a speech. So those are going to be really critical, and that's what this speech will help to determine, is if you're understanding those concepts, or if you're not, you need some more work in those areas. Other things to consider for nervousness: breathe. You really do need to remember to breathe. Sometimes people forget, and then all of a sudden they're in the middle of a sentence, and then they need to take a deep breath, and people tend to notice that. So instead, work on having your breaths at the ends of sentences whenever possible. Realize it's a public speaking class. It's one speech grade in one class in your entire collegiate career. It's not going to determine whether or not you can get a raise at a job, whether or not you get a job, whether or not you keep your job. These skills are valuable, no doubt. These skills may help you to do that, but this one speech is not going to make or break the rest of your life. Another thing to consider is that the overall grade is mostly based on content, and only a very small percentage of it is on delivery. You have to have the content down, but then your delivery, you can have some area for improvement and still do okay on the speech. So that's important to remember as well. Another thing to consider is that your audience wants you to do well. Nobody wants to watch a bad speech. We all want you to have a really good speech. So nobody wants you to fail. Everybody's rooting for you to succeed. Some other things to consider when it comes to nervousness: try to avoid caffeine right before giving your speech. Caffeine ramps up your energy level, and if you're nervous, it's just going to make it even worse. Realize that you have friends that are out there that will want you to succeed, so there really shouldn't be a whole lot of pressure on yourself when it comes to this speech. Gestures are a good way to get rid of some of that nervous energy. If you don't have gestures or effective movement or a combination of the two, you tend to do the stuff you should. You'll grip your hands, you'll fidget, you'll play with your hair, your shirt, you'll sway, you'll move back and forth or front to back. You do all of these things that you shouldn't be doing because you have nervous energy and it has to go somewhere. Also consider using some of that energy to have vocal variety. It doesn't mean you talk really fast all the time, but it means that you have some energy at times. The things you're excited about, be excited about them. That's okay. The Any Old Bag speech is about you. We're getting to learn about you. So therefore, have some of that energy when talking about the exciting things about you. If you have some ideas, you're more than welcome to discuss them in the discussion forum, and you can provide those tips to other students as well. All right, thanks. Have a good day.